Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, we are discussing on Infosys reactjs interview experience questions, and the question and answers discussed in this video are based upon real interview experience shared by a candidate. So let's begin. Our first question is, what are the new features that were introduced in HTML5? So you can answer this question by saying that in HTML5, very important thing which was introduced was semantic tags. What are semantic tags? So semantic tags, they convey the meaning to the developer and to the browser, so they are helpful in structuring the content better. They are also helpful in making your website rank better and make them SEO friendly. Also they help people who have disabilities, they help them also. Also, they help NVDA tools or reading tools which are helpful in accessibility to know better that what this section represents. So in semantic tags, examples are like article, section, aside, header, footer. So these are semantic tags. Also in HTML5, audio and video tags were introduced. So audio and video tags, they were useful for multimedia without any kind of plugins. So this is one of the example of the video tag which was introduced in HTML5, where we have to write our video link. We have to give that path in our src attribute of video tag. And web APIs like local storage and session storage was also introduced in HTML5 to store the data in browser. Now let's see our next question. Our second question is, what is difference between flex and grid? So flex and grid, they are layout structures and they are helpful in positioning the elements inside a container. Difference between flex and grid is, flex is useful for one dimensional use case and it is useful for great aligning items in row or column. So it is great for aligning the items in row or column once, like one dimension at once. And then we have grid, that is useful for two-dimensional use case and it controls both rows and columns together. So we have to use flex for smaller layout, and grid we can use for full page or some complex layouts. We can use our grid. So example, we can see these flex and grid, they are used for styling purposes. So we have written our dot container. In CSS you can go and write this block, and then you have to write display as flex, and then you can give justify content space between. There are multiple values which you can assign to justify content, like space evenly and space between, center, flex start, flex end. So there are multiple values which you can assign to justify content. And let us see grid now. So with grid you have to again write display as grid. You have to define that this container is going to have positioning property of grid. And then you are writing grid template column repeat 3 1 fr, which means that whatever is the width of your screen, there will be 3 columns in repeat 3. The first value 3 mentions about the 3 columns, and 1 fr means each table is going to get the one fraction each. So there will be equal number of columns, 3 columns, but their sizes will be equal. That is what this 1 fr means. Then we have gap. So gap is what this is called as gap between the boxes. This is called as gap. So this difference, you can explain what is the difference between flex and grid. So flex is useful for one dimensional use case, whereas grid is useful for 2 dimensions. Let's get into our third question, that is, what is hoisting in JavaScript? So if you have observed in any other languages, if you see, if you are trying to use the variable before you have declared, then you are going to get an error that this variable is not defined. But in JavaScript that is not the case. In JavaScript you will be able to access the variable. You might not get the exact data of whatever is the initialized value below the line, but you will not get error. There will be no error in JavaScript. So let us see by definition what it means. Hoisting means moving the variable and the function declaration to top of their scope before the execution. So before any execution is happening, we are going to move the variable and the function declaration to top of their scope. So for example, this is our var a is equal to 10, where we have declared and initialized the value, but we are trying to access the value of a in the line number 1 before we have initialized or declared the value, right? It should be giving us the error. In any other language, if we try to do such thing, it would give us error, but in JavaScript it doesn't give us error. In fact, it gives us value undefined, so there is no error. Why? Because of hoisting. So what happens in hoisting is, in hoisting, this declaration of our variable is going to move to the top of their scope, and then this variable is going to get value assigned as undefined by default. So initialization is happening in second line only, but variable declaration is hoisted to top of their scope. That is why when you try to do console, then you get undefined. This is how hoisting works in var. Whereas coming to let and const keyword were introduced in ES6. Var was there previously also. So with let and const, they also get hoisted, but they are not initialized. In fact, they are in temporal dead zone. So whenever you're trying to access any variable before their declaration, then you might get reference error, but still you will not get the error that they are not defined. They are defined, but with let and const, you will not get undefined. You might get a reference error. This is called as hoisting. Now let's see our fourth question, that is, what is closures? So closures, they allow a function to access the variable from its outer scope even after the outer function has returned, and they are useful for data privacy, for state management, and for callbacks. So let us try to understand this definition with the help of a code. So we will see code here now. In code, you can see there is a function, outer function, and we have initialized declared and initialized a variable, and then we are returning a function from here. So this is what is the work of outer function. So outer function, how are we calling? We are just calling outer function, and we are getting whatever was returned in some variable called as counter here. What is returned from outer function? What is returned? It is this function is what is returned. So this counter variable is going to have reference. It is going to reference to this inner function. Okay, so this is what outer function does. So we can say that outer function has returned. Outer function has returned. It has done its job. But when we are trying to call the inner function now, this counter variable was pointing to our inner function, right? So whenever we are trying to call the inner function now, it is having something called as count variable. But what is count variable here? There is nothing called as count variable in this scope. What is the scope of this inner function? It is only this much. So we don't see anything called as count variable here. In fact, it should have given us any kind of error. There is no argument which we have received. There is no variable declaration. So what does this count mean? What is it going to do plus plus with? What will it increment? So what happens? Count will be pointing to the variable which is present in the outer scope of the outer function, even though outer function has returned. This is called as closure. So you can read, this allows function to access a variable from its outer function. So what is the, it allows function, which function is it allowing? It is allowing inner function to access variable. Which variable? It is allowing it to access count variable from its outer scope. So what is outer scope? It is outer function, even after the outer function has returned. So this is how closure works. So whenever you're writing count plus plus, so 0 plus plus 0 plus 1 becomes 1, so 1 is printed. And then we have again written counter, we have again called it, then again it will be 1 plus 1. What will it become? 1 plus 1 will become 2. So you have got the value 2. So whatever is the variable in the outer function, that is stored somewhere. All the changes are stored, and then inner function is able to access the outer variable from the outer scope. This is what is called as closure. Now let's see our fifth question. What is difference between double equals and triple equals to? So double equals to, this compares value after type conversion. So there is some kind of coercion happening, and this is loosely checked operator. And this triple equals to, this compares value, it also checks the data type. So there is no type conversion implicitly done, and we have to always prefer triple equals to for strict equality. So in the code bases which you might be using in companies, there also, for any project, there also you have to make use of triple equality in order to avoid any kind of error or bug. Let us see an example. So here you can see we have string 5 and we have number 5, and we are trying to do the comparison using 2 equals. It will give us true, that yeah, value is true. So it is not checking the type, that here we have string and here we have number. So there is no check on type, it is just checking the value. So there is conversion here. So this 5 is in string and number is 5 is in number, so the value is 5, no matter it is string or number. So that is what is called as conversion. So the type might be getting converted of either of the one, that is why value is same, you are getting true. But whereas if you see string 5 triple equals to number 5, here there is difference in type of the variables, difference in type of the values, that is why you get false, and there is no type conversion, there is no implicit type conversion happening. This is the difference between double equals and triple equals in JavaScript. Let us see our next question. What is difference between length keyword and size keyword, and when do you use it? So length keyword, this is useful to get the array and strings length. This is property useful with array and string, and size is useful with map and set. Example, you can see here we have array with the name ARR, and then you're writing console.log ARR.length. You might get length as 3 because there are 3 elements here, 0, 1, 2. So in array, index starts with 0, but in total elements are 3, so you're getting 3. But with set, you can declare your set like this with this syntax new and then set keyword. And if you try to see console.log set.size, you're going to get the size of that set. So if you try to exchange this keyword, you might get error, or you might not get the exact result, correct result. So you make sure that you don't get confused between length and size keyword. Length is useful for string and array, and size is useful for map and set. Our next question is, what are arrow function? In JavaScript, we have multiple functions like regular function, anonymous function, generator function, callback functions, higher order functions, and also we have something called as arrow functions. They were also introduced in ES6, and they, let us see a definition now. They help us with a shorter syntax. They don't have their own this, and they are great for callbacks and functional components. Arrow function, they don't have their own this or arguments, and making them ideal for React event handlers. So let us see an example here. How do we declare our regular function? So regular function, we write it as function keyword. First we have to write function keyword, then function name, and then we have argument a comma b. Then we will have the curly braces inside which we will be writing our functions logic. This is our logic because it is add function, so it is having very simple logic of a plus b, and then you are returning that value. This is how we write our regular function. Let us see how do we write the same function using arrow functions. So with arrow functions, we drop this function keyword, and here we will be making use of const add arrow. This is our variable name in which we will be storing whatever value we will get from function, and then we have to write equals to symbol, and in this parenthesis we are going to send our arguments, and then we have fat arrow function here, and after fat arrow function we can write our logic. So this will be returned here. You can also write it in multiple line. If you have multiple line logic, you can write it in multiple lines. Since here we have only one line functionality, that is why we have dropped this return keyword. Also we have dropped the curly braces. So this is not required only if you are having one line of your logic for a function, but in case it's more, you can write curly braces, and in separate lines you can write your logic. So this is called as arrow function. Let's see our eighth question now. Eighth question is, what are promises? So promises, they represent a value that might be available now or later or never. So it is like promising that in future your value might come, it will be either fulfilled or it will get rejected. So that is called as promise. They are JavaScript objects, and they replace the callback hell, which was also called as pyramid of doom, and it simplifies the async code for any API calls or asynchronous code, whichever we used to write. Previously we used to make use of callback hell, and pyramid of doom is what we call, we used to also call it. So to replace the callback hell, we got promises in ES6 again. Let us see the syntax of how do we define promises. So to define promises, we have to make use of new keyword, and then we have to write promise keyword. After that, we have to make sure that in first there is only one argument. In this argument we have to pass a callback function. So this is our callback function arrow functions, which we have seen in the previous question also. In this arrow function, there will be two arguments which are expected, that is resolve and reject. Then we are returning a value that set timeout. After 1 second you are going to resolve this promise that after 1 second you will get the data. So that data you will get it in get data variable, and then that get data we are going to uh, like make use of dot then. Once you have got the data after 1 second, then you are consoling it. This is how we handle the promises. So promise definition, we write it this way. This is how we declare a promise. And handling is what we do most of the time with the API calls involved. So whenever you are calling any API, then you get the data in promises format only. So most of the time we don't write any promise on our own, but yeah, we should know what how to define the promises. But yeah, most of the time we are handling the data from promise. So once you have got the data from promise, you make use of dot then, and then you get show the data whatever you want to do. And then if there is any error in resolve case, you can write dot then. If there is rejection that you are not getting data, then you can handle it in dot catch. And after dot catch we have dot finally. No matter your promise was resolved or it was rejected, it is going to execute the line of block code block in finally block. So this is how we handle our promise. Let's see our next question. Next question is, what is async await? So async await, they make the promise based code look more synchronous, and under the hood await just waits for the promise to resolve. So if you have seen in the previous section how we used to handle our promise, if it was resolved we used to write dot then we had dot catch and then dot finally. Most of the times whenever you're trying to fetch make use of fetch to call any API, or you're calling any API, then there are chances that you will have to parse your data into JSON for 2-3 times. So there will be 2-3 times dot then dot then dot then you will have dot catch, then you will have dot finally. So this makes your code look more ugly and it is difficult to understand. That is why we have async await, and I think they were introduced in ES8. So they make your code look more synchronous. So they are useful for handling promises only, but it is better way of writing and most accepted way of writing and handling the promises. So let us see example here. Whenever you are making use of await, one thing you have to make sure is you are always making your function async. Okay, and then you write function and then function name. So here see, you're making use of fetch, you're calling some API here, and that you're awaiting, so that promise will get resolved in some time. So once promise is resolved, you will get the data in res variable, and after you have got the variable data in variable result, so you are again doing await because you want to uh, parse your data in JSON. So you are again storing the data in data variable and then you're consoling. So if you had to do this in normal way of dot then, so here you would have written one dot then, and then again here you would have written your dot then, and it would make your code look more complicated. That is why we have await. This makes your code look more simpler and more synchronous. And you are calling the fetch user here, so you're calling the API. Basically you're calling the API and then you're consoling whatever is the data. This is called as async await. Now let's see our 10th question, that is, what is event loop? So how our event loop works, how asynchronous code is executed is, let me give you a brief on it. There is something called as call stack, and call stack, they work on LIFO order, which means last in first out. So whatever code was put in last in this stack will be executed first. So that is why it is called a stack. And suppose we have some line of code here, some hundreds of line of code. So whatever is the one by one, all of these lines are going to get pushed into this call stack, and whatever was put at last, that will be executed first. So one by one you will have many code here in this call stack. So one by one all of these will get executed, but for asynchronous, this is for synchronous code. Okay, but with asynchronous code, with asynchronous I mean like API calls, promises, set timeout, set interval, these things. So there is something called as queue, callback queue. And in callback queue also we have something called as micro task queue and macro task queue. So there is micro task queue and then there is macro task queue. In micro task queue you have promises, and in macro task queue you have set timeout, set interval. So these things are there: set interval and set timeout. Okay, so this is our queue. Now what happens, these are our asynchronous callback functions which we have to execute. So there is something called as event loop here. What event loop does, event loop is going to check that if in case call stack is empty, once the call stack is empty, it is going to the, it will go to callback queue and it will check is there any function that has to be executed at priority. So whatever the promises are there, promises are stored in micro task queue and they have more priority when compared to set interval and set timeout which are present in macro task queue. So it is going to check that is there anything priority which has to be done. So it will see yes, there is one function of promise which has to be executed. It is going to get this function and it will put it in the call stack here. This is how event loop works. Then again it will check is there anything else also left. If there is 2 3 promises, it is going to get that also and it will put it in our call stack. And after our micro task queue is empty, then it will check for macro task queue, is there any important asynchronous operation I have to do. Then whatever is the function of set interval, set timeout, that will also be put in our call stack, and that is how our asynchronous codes are executed. And once all these callback queues are empty, then again our synchronous codes are executed. So we will see a definition. It handles the asynchronous code by moving the tasks from queue after the call stack is empty. As I've said that call stack should be empty, then only we will like event loop will be checking the queue. It is going to check and it is going to move the task from the queue to the call stack. And JavaScript, it is single threaded, but it achieves the concurrency through event loop plus callback queue. So as we all know that JavaScript is a single threaded language, but asynchronous code, how do we handle? We handle it using event loops and callback queues. Now let's see our 11th question. What are different data types in TypeScript? So in JavaScript we have let var const, and we also say that JavaScript is dynamically typed language, meaning that if you just write let name, after declaration you can assign name with value string, you can assign you can assign numbers, you can assign boolean, you can assign anything, undefined, null, anything. That is why we call JavaScript dynamically typed language, but it leads to multiple bugs in future. That is why we have something called as TypeScript. It is more strict version of JavaScript and it makes your code statically typed. So before you are assigning any value, before that you have to mention that what will be the type of this variable whichever you are going to use. So what are different data types in TypeScript? It is string. So string example is this: in single quote or double quote, whatever value you write, that is called as string. Then we have number. So this is example of number. We have boolean. So boolean can be true or false. Null means that you are intentionally assigning nothing to your variable, so it is not going to have any value but you have intentionally assigned it. And then we have undefined. What does undefined mean? Undefined means that you have just given, you have just declared your variable with let name and you did not give any value. It means that it will be initialized to undefined, like you are not sure of what your data type will be, you have not intentionally given any value. That is undefined. Then we have void. When do we use void? Void is useful when is useful for the functions when it doesn't return anything. For example, you have some function which is just consoling some data, or it is just passing some data, or it is not returning anything. In fact, that is the appropriate explanation of void. When do we use void? Is we use void for functions and it doesn't return anything. That is when we make use of void. For example, if you're just consoling some data, that is when you can use the void. You can write that this function is not returning any value, that type of that function will be void. Then we have any means your variable can have anything. It is similar to making TypeScript variable similar to JavaScript, so there will be no check on the variable, it can have any value. Then we have unknown. Unknown means variable type is not known at the time of writing the variable. So currently we don't know the type of variable, but in future we might. It is safer than any. When we have to use unknown is with any, you can assign any value to it. It becomes similar to JavaScript, but with unknown it is safer than any, because you must check its type before using it. So we have to use unknown when you don't know the value type yet, but still you want to use the TypeScript safety. That is why you can use the unknown. Then we have object. So object is used to write the data types of the properties of the object. Then we have tuple, and then we have enum. Tuple, what tuple does is, tuple is helpful for having the fixed size, fixed length array, where each element has specific type. So for example, if you just write that let let a is my array, and then you are defining that first value in this will be string, so you have to type this complete string. I'm just writing first letter, so string, and then you write here number. So whenever you are initializing value to this a, your first value should be string, your first value will be in double quotes, and second value will be number. In case you are giving anything else, it will give you a error. So this is called as tuple. Also here, the you cannot rearrange this. uh, Rearrange this in the sense, you cannot write here as one and you cannot give strings. So this format matters. You cannot do the changes. This is called as tuple. Then we have enum. What enum does is, enum makes code more readable and maintainable when using fixed set of related constant. So this is helpful with the constant. For example, we can have const status, and status will have some constant values, right? Like success will be 200, not found will be 404. That is how we have to use enums. So example, if I have to give, you can write here success as 404. So across everywhere in your code, you can make use of this status dot success. So everywhere this constant will be used, that success value will be 200. So these are the data types of our TypeScript. Then next question is, what is type inference? Type inference, TypeScript infers the type automatically from the assigned value. So what does this mean is, suppose you're in your TypeScript file, you're just writing let age is equal to 25, thinking that it would work like JavaScript and you will not get any error in future, because you have not written anything here. You have not written anything that whether this will be string or it will be number. But there is something called as type inference in TypeScript, which means that TypeScript is going to infer the type of the variable automatically from the assigned value. You don't always need to specify the types explicitly. So in TypeScript file, if you just write let age is equal to 25, this means that type will be inferred and age will become number automatically. You need not even define it. This is called as type inference. So next time, whenever you're trying to assign some string property, string value to the age, then it is going to give you an error. This is called as type inference. Let's see the next question. What is interface? So we have seen different data types in TypeScript which are useful for individual values like string, null, number, boolean. But for interfaces, they are useful to define the structure of object. Of course, we also have object data type, but interface has some better advantages. That is why we mostly make use of interfaces in real world. So it is by definition, it is used to define the structure of object similar to the object data type. And here we can see the syntax. We have to write interface keyword and then user interface name, and then there will be first property called name, and then the age, and name is going to be a string, and then age is going to be a number. This is how we define our interface. And how do we use this? Is our normal object const user, and this is our properties like key value pairs, that name is going to have Shruti and age is going to have 24. But what will be the type? How do we statically make it statically typed? So we have to write user. So this is going to point to interface user, which means that first property will be name and it is going to have value string, and second property will be age and it is going to have value number. This is called as interface. Let's get into 14th question. What is difference between interface and type in TypeScript? So difference between interface and type is extendability. In terms of inheritance, we can do that in interface, but with type it is limited. We cannot achieve extends in type. Then we have union. In interface we cannot do the union, but with type we can do union. And merging is possible in interface, with type it is not possible. So if you see inheritance wise, extends and merging is more useful when we see the application of interfaces and objects. How do we use it in our code bases? So interface is most preferred one. With interfaces we can do extend and merging. With type we can do union. Now let's say our 15th question. How do we define optional and read-only properties in TypeScript? So they might ask you to share your screen, and they might ask you to code that how do you define, like how would you make a property optional and how would you make it read-only, like what is the syntax. So syntax, you can write interface keyword and then user. So these are our normal properties like id, number, name will be string, and third property will be age and number. But how do you make it read-only? If you want to make any property read-only, which means that once you have assigned value, next time you cannot change it, then you have to write keyword called read only in front of that property. And if you want to make it optional, that if you have age you want to write, then it's okay, you can write. If not, it's okay, don't give. So that is called as optional. It is not mandatory for you to save that data. For that you have to write a question mark in front of that property or in front of that key. So this is how you make your property optional, and by writing read only keyword you make your property read only and no one can change it in future. So how are we using it? Const u, it is going to refer the blueprint of the user interface. Then we have our object id is the first one, so id is having value 1. Then we have name Shruti, age is optional. So if you want you can give, if you don't want don't give it, it's optional. So here we have not given age and still we are not getting any error. And in case you are trying in future, you are trying to write u.id is equal to 2, this is going to give you error. Why? Because it is a read only property, we declared it as read only, right? In case we had not written it to be read only, you could have changed it, but here it is not possible because it is read only. Our 16th question is rotate the array to the right. So you interviewer might give you the array and they might tell you that by how many times you have to rotate. So if they have said you that by 2 times you have to rotate to the right, then how will you rotate? You will write 1, 2, 3 and 4. You have rotated it to right and 5 will be replaced here. Then again second time you have to rotate, so your 1 will come here, and then 2, 3 and your 4 will be shifted here, your 5 will come here. So this is how you have to rotate it. If they say 3 times, then again there will be one more shifting, by one more digit shifting, and then they might give you 6, 10, any number, like how many times you have to rotate it. So let us see how, what logic can you write there. So you have to write a function rotate and you are accepting array and by how many times you want to rotate it. So in case you are given any value that by 5 times you have to rotate, see what happens here is, if they say you by 1 time you have to rotate, so this is what you got, then 2, 3, 4, 5. So at last if you see fifth time when you rotate your array, it will become the exactly same array like the original one. It will become 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at the fifth rotation. Now in case they say that okay, this is the sixth times you have to rotate, so what does this mean? That by 5 times it will become same, right? By 5 times it has become same like your original array. Now sixth time means by 1 you will rotate, so 1 and 6 results will be same. So 6 time rotation or 1 time rotation, they are same, you are going to get this result. So that is why what are we doing here, we are going and checking 6 modulus 1 or 1 modulus 6 modulus 5 or 1 modulus 5. So what is the remainder part of it? So 1 modulus 5 will be 1, right? So you have to rotate it by 1, whereas 6 modulus 5 will be 1. So 1 or 6 modulus 5 will be 1. So anyway you are going to get the same result. That is why we are writing this modulus part. So once you have got that in, that how many times you are supposed to rotate it, you are just writing arr dot slice, and we are making use of this spread operator here. So arr dot slice from 0 to minus n. What is n here? Like for example, in this example we are passing 2, so 2 modulus 5 is 2 anyway, so you are getting 2. So 0 to minus 2 you have to do slicing here. So what will happen here, let us see. 0 to minus 2, so this will come and 2 will come and 3 will come, because till minus 2 you have to do slicing, right? Minus means from negative you have to exclude it, from the ending of the array you have to exclude it. So minus 2, 2 elements you have excluded from ending of your array. So 1 2 3 you have got here, so you will just write 1 2 3 here. And then we have array dot slice of minus 2 in the first part. So minus 2 in the sense, from last of your array you are going to get the last two elements. So last two elements, what are last two elements? They are 4 5. So finally when you combine, you are making use of the spread operator. So when you combine, you are going to get result as 4 5 1 2 3. So this is how your array will become if you have shifted your array for 2 times, if you have rotated your array for 2 times. Similarly, if they give 3 4 5, this function would work. So it is not like you have hard coded it. There is a logic. So whatever is the number you are passing from here, that will work. Let's see our next question. What is difference between functional versus class component? So functional component, they are very recent one, very useful. They are simpler and they make use of hooks. In functional component we don't have lifecycle methods, that is why hooks were introduced. And hooks are easier to read also, they are easier to learn, and they are easier to debug if some other developer is debugging your code. And whereas class component, they make use of lifecycle methods and they are little complicated. Functional component are modern standards in React, you can say. As I've said, that functional components are the newer versions and class components are older. So nowadays we don't make use of class components. Let's see example. So in example you can see we have functional component. First example, functional component, they are similar to your functions, how you define them. So you make use of functions keyword and then function name. You can also make use of the arrow functions here, and then you have braces, and then you have to write the keyword return, in which you can return only one element. If here you are returning heading hello, in case you want to return something extra also with heading, you want to, maybe you want to show some 5 headings with one paragraph with one image, then how will you send? Because we can only pass one element here. So in that case you can have a container div. Inside div you can put how many ever elements you want to, but there will be only one element which can be returned, either div or h1, anything. So this is how you write your functional component. Then our class components, which are old, they are declared using class keyword, and then you have to write your component name. It is going to extend the react dot component. So this is compulsory to write. You have to extend your component, your own component, from react dot component. From react's component you have to extend, and also you have to make use of render. You have to write that you are going to render this element on the screen. So render you have to write, and then you can return whatever you want to. So this is how we write class based component, and this is how we write functional component. Now let's see our next question. What is use effect with cleanup? So use effect, they run the side effects, right? In use effect we can run it one time or we can run it multiple times. So there is something called as cleanup also, that whenever your component is uh, removed from the DOM, or whenever it is again rendered, then we can have some cleanup functions, and those functions will be executed. So let's see. Cleanup, this avoid the memory leaks, of course, and cleanups, they remove the subscription, event listeners, and set intervals. Such things, they are helpful in removing. So let us see example. We have use effect written here. This is our normal syntax where we write use effect keyword, and then there is a callback function, and there is a dependency array. If you don't write anything in dependency, it is going to run initially first time. If you write some variables here inside this dependency array, then it is going to run every time that variable changes. Every time value of that variable changes, then it is going to get executed. And this is our logic of some set interval, whatever we have done. And to remove that subscription, to avoid the memory leak, what we have to do, we have to write one return function inside use effect. So this return function, whatever you're writing, is called as cleanup function, and it is going to run. It is, see here, what are we doing? We are just doing clear interval. If you have written some kind of event listeners, then that also you can remove those event listeners. So it is going to execute the cleanup when your component is unmounting. Also, like whenever component is unmounting, this is the first time, this is one time when return function cleanup function works. And also when your component is mounting, right, that time also this cleanup function works, so that in case there is anything left out, it is going to clean up everything, and then your component will have all the data again from the beginning. There is no changes affecting your component. So that is why we use the return cleanup function. Let's see our next question. What is difference between use callback and use memo? So use callback, use memo, they are hooks provided to us in React, and they are useful for performance optimization. So differences are: use callback, they memoize a function and they prevent the function recreation, whereas use memo, they memoize a value and they prevent the expensive recalculation. So both of them are helpful in the performance optimization. Let us see code syntax. So code syntax, you can see both of them syntax is same. They expect a callback function, and then there will be a dependency array in both of them, and then there will be some function. So in use callback, you are pointing to a function that in case anything changes with this variable, then only create the function again, else no need of recreation of the function. Similarly, if this calculate function, there was some function called calculate, and it is performing very expensive calculation which might add lag to your applications, then there is no need of recalculating it again and again in case nums is not changing. So suppose based upon nums it has to recalculate something or do some kind of expensive calculation, so no need of doing it again and again. In case if this changes, then only recalculate, else it is going to cache your value. And one more difference, you can say that use memo, use callback, of course they are useful for performance optimization, but when are they actually useful? Use memo, they are useful for expensive calculations. That function need not run again and again. But use callback, you can say that if you're passing your function to a child component and your parent component is rendering again and again, that doesn't mean that your child function should also re-render. But in case if you're passing any function from parent to child, it is going to re-render. Okay, so for that reason, so, we make use of use callback. By use callback, we are not creating that function again and again. In case that function is created once your parent is rendering again and again, and your function is created, so if you're passing that variable to your child, your function to the child, even though the function is same, it is the same function, but in JavaScript we know that functions are first class citizens and they cannot be same. Like even though they have same value, they are always checked by their reference, and references of functions are always different, right? So that is why functions, even if they are same by value, same by content, they are going to re-render your child again and again. That is why you have to make use of use callback, that don't do any, like don't recreate this calculate function, because your child might get affected, the performance of child component might get affected. That is why you make use of use callback. So use callback, they are useful to prevent the function recreation, they memoize a function. And use memo, they prevent the expensive recalculation and they memoize a value. Yeah, so we are done with our very important questions which were asked in Infosys interview. If you found this video to be helpful, then do give a like to this video and subscribe to the channel. In case you have any comments or you want to give any feedback or suggestion, then do let me know in comment section. Thanks for watching.